A sit-up is a physical exercise designed to strengthen the abdominal muscles in which a person sits up from a supine position without using the arms for leverage.
Phase 1 is flexion at the shoulder, lifting the arm out in front of the body. The 5 main muscles that are involved in this movement are 1. The pectoralis major. The pectoralis major is a large, strong muscle that produces shoulder flexion. It is located in the front of the chest and attaches by tendon to the humerus, or upper arm bone. It is innervated by both the lateral and medial pectoral nervus. The pectoralis muscle is the main shoulder flexor. 2. Anterior deltoid. The deltoid muscle is composed of 3 parts: anterior, middle, and posterior. The anterior deltoid muscle is located on top of the shoulder and originates on the collarbone. The anterior deltoid tendon attaches to the front of the humerus, producing shoulder flexion. 3. Biceps. The biceps brachii muscle split into 2 tendons at the shoulder, the long head and the short head. The long head of the biceps muscles assists other muscles with shoulder flexion. It is located in the front of the upper arm and attaches to the socket part of the shoulder joint. 4. Coracobrachialis. The coracobrachialis is a small muscle that also produces shoulder flexion. It originates from a protrusion on the shoulder blade called the coracoid process and attaches to the humerus bone. 5. Teres major and subscapularis. The teres major and subscapularis muscles assist other muscles with shoulder flexion. The teres major originates on the shoulder blade and its tendon attaches to the front of the humerus bone. The subscapularis muscle covers the front surface of the shoulder blade and its tendon attaches to the humerus bone. Phase 2. Flexion of the elbow and placing both hands on opposite sides of the shoulder. Here are the 4 main types of muscles used in this movement. 1. Biceps brachii. The biceps brachii, a 2-headed muscle, sits on the front of your upper arm and is the most visible elbow flexor. It originates on the scapula, runs the length of your upper arm, and attaches to the bones of the forearm, the ulna, and the radius. The short head of the biceps brachii sits on the pinky side of the upper arm, and the long head sits on the thumb side. 2. Brachioradialis. The brachioradialis is a long, thin muscle that extends down the thumb side of your forearm. It originates on your humerus or upper arm bone, crosses the elbow joint, and attaches to the lower part of your radius, the smaller of the 2 forearm bones. 3. Brachialis. The brachialis muscle lies underneath the biceps brachii. It originates on the lower half of the humerus bone, crosses the elbow joint, and attaches to the ulna, the larger of the 2 forearm bones. The brachialis muscle is active in elbow flexion regardless of the angle of the forearm. 5. Other muscles. The pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, and extensor carpi radialis longus, 3 small muscles in the forearm, are also involved in elbow flexion, but not to the extent of the 3 mentioned above. These 3 small forearm muscles are mainly responsible for movement of the wrist and forearm, but they do assist during the elbow flexion. Lastly, the main joint that is involved in this movement is the humeroradial joint, the joint formed where the radius and the humerus meet. This joint allows you to bend and straighten your arms. Phase 3. Knee flexion to a 90-degree angle. In this movement, there are 3 main muscles that are involved, which is biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. They are all posterior thigh muscles, which are categorized in the hamstring muscles group. They cross posteriorly behind the hip joint and the knee joint. When concentrically contracting, these 3 muscles work together to produce flexion at the knee joint, which in this case is moving the lower leg, the tibia bone, closer to the thigh, the femur, until there is a 90-degree angle between the 2. Phase 4. Spinal flexion. also known as the curl-up stage. Here are the four main muscles used in this movement. 1. Rectus abdominis. The rectus abdominis muscles perform an important task of flexing the torso and spine in the abdominal region. It does this by pulling the ribcage closer to the pelvis. 2. Transverse abdominis. Your transverse abdominis is the deepest layer of large abdominal muscles and has horizontal fibers that contract towards the center line of your body. Your transverse abdominis provides stability instead of flexion, contracting before you do a sit-up to prepare your torso for movement. 3. External obliques. The obliques, which are superficial lateral abdominal muscle layers. The external obliques are on top of your rectus abdominis, and they flex your vertebrae column and compress the abdominal wall to support your internal organs while doing a sit-up. 4. Internal obliques. Lying under the external obliques are the internal obliques, which connect to the lateral edge of your rectus abdominis. Internal obliques also assist flexion and support internal organs. During sit-ups, the sides of both your internal and external obliques work together to support trunk flexion. While most people think these muscles are the main characters creating a sit-up, their job is actually mainly on dynamic contractions, which means they are primarily used to simply stabilize your body in a curled up position during the exercise. Phase 5. Hip flexion, also known as the sit-up phase. The 5 main muscles used in this phase are: 1. Psoas major. The psoas muscles attach on the lower spine, or lumbar vertebrae, and passes in front of the hip joint and goes to the top of the long thigh bone, also known as the femur. 2. Iliacus. The iliacus is a flat, triangular muscle which lies deep within the pelvis. It attaches from the pelvis to the thigh bone, or femur. Its primary action is to flex and rotate the thigh. 3. Rectus femoris. The rectus femoris muscle is one of the 4 quadriceps muscles that sit in the middle and front of the thigh. It attaches from the pelvis to just below the knee on the patellar tendon, and it is responsible for knee extension and hip flexion. 4. Pectineus muscle. The pectineus muscle is a flat quadrangular muscle that lies on the top of the inner thigh. It is primarily responsible for hip flexion, but it also abducts and rotates the thigh. 5. Sartorius. The sartorius muscle is a long, thin muscle that runs down the length of the thigh from the pelvis to the knee. It is the longest muscle in the human body and helps flex the knee and leg. Once stimulus is applied or introduced to the body, the sensory neurons will receive the stimulus and carry the nerve impulses from the peripheral part of the body to the central nervous system, which in this case, because it's not a reflex movement, the nerve impulses will get inputted to the integration center in the brain. After the brain processes the impulse, it now outputs motor neurons to send the information to the effector that is going to produce the movement.